The journey would start in the small town of Picton, which, despite a population of only 3,000 and a seemingly idyllic yet sleepy quaintness at the dead end of Queen Charlotte Sound, qualifies for a position of some geographic importance in joining New Zealand's two islands together. Because this is the South Island link for the inter-island ferry service. It's a beautiful little town. Tourists love it.
Hang on.
What?
In 1856, the people of Picton complained about robberies and burglaries and not being safe in the homes during the day or night. What sort of hick town is this?
It's fine today, really it is.
No.
It's good place to live.
Beautiful place.
I've lived in a few places and I've travelled a good part of the world, but this would be as good a nicer place to live as anywhere. You know everybody, or nearly everyone in the town. Where you from?
I'm from Liverpool.
Liverpool.
Yeah.
Over the Beatles.
Yeah. Everyone says that.
So, with evidence that Picton's a great place to live and grow old, we spent a couple of days exploring the town, nearby Waikawa and the surrounding area. With Sean having got used to his borrowed bike, it was finally time to get ready. These weren't any old Jap crap bikes, and they were certainly Harley-Davidsons, but neither were they what they seemed. Rubberneckers would assume we were riding 50-year-old classic British bikes, but in fact these were Enfields, built in India using original machinery made in Britain for Royal Enfield motorcycles. Some say that on a still day after a Madras-built Enfield has passed by, there's a distinct smell of tikka masala in the air. And so we set off under blue skies and in brilliant sunshine.
This is Havelock on the way to Nelson. In 1851 the British paid £100 for this place. They've not finished the cinema yet.
With no movies to watch, we set off in search of some personal fuel and shortly arrived at Canvas Town and its typical Kiwi pub, the Trout Hotel. As we were to learn, the place is famous not just for its fishing.
The tourist books will tell you that Canvas Town is famous for gold, but there's other treasure to be found in these hills. Pigs.
Hang them up in my shed, knife out, break them down, I head shoot them, I don't chase them dogs, they're a lot better the way I hunt. Beautiful meat. Chasing the dogs just stresses the most. Yeah. I've never got one asleep yet, I don't know what they taste like, but
It's a bit quicker than dogs.
oh, certainly it is better meat.
However, when we reached the middle of nowhere cafe at Pelora's Bridge, pork wasn't on the menu.
Venison. Ah, lovely. Very nice. A bit like steak, really. I mean, it's just like steak. Very nice.
Sparkling rivers are everywhere in the South Island. The Pelorus is just one of hundreds. But though a swim was tempting, we stayed only long enough to shoot some venison into our mouths. Before long, we were back on the bikes and headed for Nelson. Nelson's a pretty city, but not immune from so-called progress, as we discovered from local man John.
But this is the railway track, all the way down through there, and that was the original main road over the top.
And why did they take it out?
What, the railway?
Yeah, why did they take the railway out?
Well, they reckon that it wasn't paying the maintenance on the track, but they did the wrong thing.
Because now you've got all these trucks hurling along.
Oh, there's going to be a super highway coming through here, all the way up through there. Super highway from way down there.
And in years to come, we'd ride that super highway, but that's a few years in the future. That night, we stayed at a camping ground within Nelson's city limits. For this trip, we chose to stay in cabins, partly for the comfort, and partly because the walls would prevent other campers hearing Sean snoring. Next day saw us heading off again, this time to the west coast town of Murchison, which actually wasn't part of the plan. The ride was going well, the roads were clear, the sun shone as we left Nelson for Karamea on the west coast.
And a huge loud noise came from this, which sounded like... bit like that. Yeah, oh, there was that too. And so we thought, well, we'd go back into Nelson and see if we can get effects. Anyway, it was rideable. Cut a long story short, the tappets, which are these bits in here, you don't need to worry about them. One of them had come incredibly loose and was going like that. Like that too.
Thunderbikes in Nelson lent us space to work and some tools, and we got the tappets adjusted. So we headed off once more, only to hear that disturbing noise yet again, further down the road.
So we're staying in a backpackers hostel here at the Commercial Hotel, and tomorrow she'll be sweet, as they say.
And she was sweet. Next up, an earth-moving experience. We stopped here at the tiny town of Inangahua, where in 1968 the locals awoke to an earthquake of magnitude 7.1. There's little evidence of it today. The town is tiny, quiet, and seemingly intact. But we did find one local who'd lived through that massive earthquake. Warren Inwood, now running a backpackers hostel in Inangahua, remembers the big event as if it were yesterday.
It was 5:30 in the morning, May the 28th, which is heading into winter for us. It was a pitch dark morning and you're woken up out of a very deep sleep. Your first impressions are, well, you think the end of the world's come. It is so absolutely mind-numbing, the sheer violence of it. Your bed being hurled around the room. It's actually quite difficult to stay in bed in an earthquake like that. The noise is so bad that I was married at the time, and my wife and I, you can't talk to each other, you can't even shout to each other. There's this huge great roar that you can't hear any individual sounds in it, and that actually only lasts for sort of half a minute. It seems like hours.
Yeah, the longest half minute of your life,
yes,
I suppose.
yeah. And I mean, we get little earthquakes quite regularly, and after a little while you realise earthquake. But until that point, you're just shattered by it. When the initial shock wave dies down, the ground continues to move for days, and every minute or so you get another quite violent tremor come through. And of course there's no power, you've lost that, no telephone, couldn't find a torch. Black as the inside of your hat, and everything breakable in the house is broken. The house actually broke into 3 separate bits.
Do you remember how it affected the community in general? I mean, it's a tragic thing, isn't it?
Yes, we were very lucky. There was few fatalities here, being that hour of the morning saved a lot of lives. Half the population here never came back to the place. Most of the houses were wrecked.
New Zealand has, on average, 10 to 15 earthquakes every day, but most are so small they can't be felt. It's only every now and then one comes along that has a devastating effect. Luckily for us, the only rumblings we felt were from the engines of the Enfields. Foregoing Karamea, we finally did make it to the west coast though, the wild west coast, a rugged shore pummeled and buffeted by the Tasman Sea. At Punakaiki, the waves and wind have combined to create a landscape of weird limestone rock formations known as the Pancake Rocks. Continuing on to Fox Glacier, our journey time was, well, glacial. The problem I'd experienced with my bike in Nelson returned. This time it was worse, and Sean had to tow me the last few kilometres to Fox. Not an easy task, and it certainly didn't leave any time to shoot any video footage. We got there, but in the morning things looked glum.
Well, this is the latest part of our adventure. If we can have that pointing down here, and I take this plastic bag off and reveal a rag. But beneath the rag, the gubbins, the working parts. Now I don't know if you can zoom in on this point, Mike, but that is a damaged piston caused by the piston hitting the valve seating. We don't know why, but to cut a long story short, a young man named Andrew at this time has taken the head away and is hoping to put the valve seat back in place, and we're hoping he's going to come back within the next 20 minutes so that we can get this bike reassembled and working and out of this goddamn place, on the road again, back on schedule, enjoying our trip. Last night was a bit of a nightmare. Tow rope, Mike, tow rope, please. This thing nearly killed me. I was physically and mentally drained last night. I've never towed a motorbike, ever. I've never been towed. But an experience, up those hills, down the hills, round the bends, those roads between, what's it? Greymouth and Franz Joseph Glacier, and here some of the most beautiful scenery. I didn't miss it, but it wasn't the way I wanted to see it. But when I go home, it's going to be something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. There's no one I'm ever going to meet has towed an Enfield motorbike in these sort of conditions in this part of the world, in that sort of weather. Beautiful sunny day. We could see the peaks of the mountains, the snow. I mean, it's just part of the trip. Important thing is we get this thing going again, we get back on the road. I feel a song coming on.
Quick, turn it off.
Well, Andrew did return with the cylinder head fixed and the valve seat back in place. He worked for a helicopter firm and had all the tools, including the glue. Yes, glue to fix the valve seat. And typical West Coaster, he didn't want paying, but we paid him anyway. He was off to the Deer Stalkers Ball that night, so we hoped he had a few drinks on us. So with really only half a day lost to the breakdown, we were able to get back to what we were there for.
So did you get many glaciers in Liverpool?
Glaciers of beer.
At Fox Glacier, the Enfields met a couple of contemporary friends from a bygone era. As the kilometres went by, my confidence in Andrew's helicopter engine glue increased, and we both started to relax and once again enjoy the South Island's impressive scenery, including the roaring waters of the Gates of Haast.
Pretty good. It's a good shot of the bridge. Show people typical bridge. I'm out of condition, but it's a bit wet down there. The spray, beautiful, clean, clear water. Yeah, worth a stop. Beautiful weather.
And on we went, this time to Wanaka. Not sure why, but we didn't shoot any video there, so there's nothing to show for it. From Wanaka, it was just a short hop to Queenstown, heart of the Lakes District, from where I sent a thank you postcard to Andrew at Fox Glacier.
Many thanks again for your help in fixing the valve seat. Now, just get that bike of yours going and you can join us next time. Cheers. Right, Bodnar. Thanks, Andrew.
Queenstown is touristy, but the scenery is dramatic. That backdrop mountain range, the Remarkables, would 6 years later achieve global fame, starring as the Misty Mountains in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. In fact, the whole of the Lakes District area is postcard perfect. Nearby is leafy Arrowtown, founded during the gold mining heydays of the area. Today it's a one dog, one double-decker bus, a lardy and hardy tourist stopover, but charming nonetheless, with a quaint collection of colonial buildings, museums and other antique paraphernalia celebrating the olden days. With both wooden and stone buildings and stone walls, it's reminiscent of that other Lake District half a world away, though this one's guarded by the local sheep to keep the tourists in check. The bikes drew their usual attention. Most people assumed we were riding restored classic English bikes until they smelled the distinct fumes of Vindaloo emanating from the hot engines. And speaking of food, this is where I introduced Sean to that famous Kiwi sensation, the chocolate dip ice cream. Oh, and that other Kiwi invention, the bungee jump, though we reckoned it was just a big letdown. You could also say it's responsible for a big drop-off in tourist numbers. We only really had one day of rain on the trip, dreadful day, so no video footage of that, but fortunately the weather cleared for the most spectacular part of the Odyssey as we headed south to Milford. On the way to Milford Sound, we had to pass through the Homer Tunnel, but, like everyone else, first of all just had to stop to say hello to this cheeky fella, the Kia, the world's only mountain parrot. Extremely tame, they'll try and wreck any part of your vehicle they can get their beaks into. Windscreen wipers are a favourite food. Very popular with tourists, they provide the perfect photo opportunity. Although the Kia is called the clown of the mountain, it's also known as the feathered wolf, because in winter that sharp beak is also used to rip open sheep to get at the animal fat. Who's a pretty boy then? And finally to Milford. The endless scenery was exhausting. Good job one of us managed to stay awake to capture the glory of Mitre Peak and the stunning Milford Sound. When I'd tried to organise accommodation, I was disappointed to find the hotel at Milford was already booked out. But that turned out to our advantage, because the alternative proved much more interesting. A catamaran called the Lady of the South Pacific, on which we'd spend a memorable night. Well, to be honest, we couldn't remember much of it the next day. Good job we had the video camera with us. the outermost point of the trip, where Milford Sound meets the Tasman Sea, we did a spot of fishing. Shoulder to shoulder, we pitted our wits against the denizens of the deep. But you just can't please some people.
Well, I don't eat fish. This one's going back. Coming up.
Oh. No, it's not really good. It's a... Did you ever see Jaws? Not really big enough for dinner.
No.
I think we'll throw him back. Oh dear.
Not all of them got returned to the sea. Some ended up on our plates for dinner. Can't get them much fresher than that.
With David.
But while the fish were biting, so too were the pesky kiwi sandflies. It was the perfect way to end a perfect day. We couldn't have asked for better weather, dinner was magical, and the wine flowed like, well, wine tends to do when you're doing something as special as this.
So, here we are on the Lady of the South Pacific. It's...
10:30.
How do you know?
Because I've checked.
It
10:30, Tuesday, the beginning of the end of our trip, and we've just...
This is it. This is as far as we go now.
Well, we've just ended.
The beginning.
No, we've just ended.
Now we're just
possibly.
beginning the end.
No, we've just ended possibly the most beautiful day of the whole trip. The scenery, the company, the whole day has been superb. Unfortunately, at this time of night, you can't see what we can see, and what we can see is
Well, we've got Mitre,
very little, a little bit of
Mitre
afterglow.
Mitre Peak over there, right? Mitre Peak, hello, testing. 1, 2. Mitre Peak over there, huge mountain here, big mountains over here, right?
But yes, been a marvellous day. Maybe the highlight of the whole trip. Well
How did
worth.
it start? How did it start?
It started in bloody cold weather,
Southerly gale,
pouring rain.
pouring rain,
You being
driving rain.
depressed as hell, stopping me and
Depressed.
saying,
I
"Do
didn't
you
wanna
want to
go.
flag it
Yeah.
out? Do you want to flag it out?
Should we forget this?
Do you want to flag it out? Forget this. This is the
Yeah,
highlight.
well,
this is why I paid £4.5 million to Singapore Efficient Airways.
These hands were gripped. I mean, these hands, whether I wanted to grip the handlebars or not, were integral with the handlebars. I mean, I could
The
not
man's
move
a wimp.
them off the
He's from the
handlebars.
southern hemisphere.
I was
Us
going like
northerners willing to stick it out because I knew at the end of the
so
day
cold.
we would see so much beautiful scenery on such a clear and beautiful day that we wouldn't be disappointed.
I'm going to say
It's
one
been
thing to
the
that.
highlight.
Bollocks.
Right, okay.
Absolute bollocks.
Right.
He had no idea it was
I
going to be
did.
like this.
I did. I've studied weather systems. I'm going for my yacht masters.
We can
I've been
we can
all
all
over
be
the north of
optimists in
England.
hindsight.
I know what the weather patterns can do, and I was absolutely right. There's no doubt in my mind that we would get here today in beautiful weather conditions, undertake a success.
This is our ensuite cabin, and here behind me, as you as you can hear, is the person I'm travelling with, basically. And if there was a lock on the door from this side, I'd make sure. Anyway, enough. It's all right. We've on this trip we have learned Japanese, and we basically we can now converse in Japanese with at least between ourselves, if not with the Japanese people. So yeah, basically this is it now. The time now is approximately 10 to 12. We finished doing our recce of the decks and the night sky, and this is the cabin, so I thought I'd show you around. Okay, ready for this? Here we go. Starting here, this is my bunk, which you see is perfectly made and beautifully flat and comfortable. And then descending down here, that's where he's that's where he's going to be sleeping. Although maybe a separate cabin would be a good idea. Now we have here a luggage compartment, place for coats and things. Generally looking in the other direction, there's the door to the cabin and the door to our ensuite, which is which is occupied. Oh, I can't go on.
This high 8, you've heard of high 8, this is now smell around. Sound, Milford Sound. Will I ever return? So you're going to take us right through those mountains
Yeah,
now?
I'm just going to shave them off a bit, they're in the way. So,
And how does this compare to driving trucks?
yeah, quite a bit different. These hills are solid. Not so much traffic here, so it's a little bit less stressful that way. And it's certainly, when you're driving a truck, you can't associate with so many people.
You see this all year round, which is, I mean, best time of year for you. What sort of day do you like?
Well, probably the middle of winter on a day like today when there's heaps of snow around is really nice to look at. Also, though, a rainy day is really spectacular because you get a lot of waterfalls and that sort of thing. So it's, in some ways, you're missing out by having all this good sunshine.
The Kingston Flyer, a famous vintage steam train, is based in Kingston on the southern shores of Lake Wakatipu, about 40 minutes south of Queenstown. 15 years later, when I finally got round to editing this video, however, the Flyer and its 14-kilometre stretch of track was on hard times and up for sale. Yours for only $3 million. We continued on from Kingston and spent yet another night in Queenstown's motor camp, a second chance to enjoy the local countryside and avoid bungee jumping. Why, with such stunning scenery, would you need to go dangling yourself from the end of a long rubber band when all you do is see the view upside down? Next day saw us in good, bad and ugly country. Brief stopover at the glacially blue Lake Tekapo, with Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest mountain, as a backdrop. The blue of the lake's water is due to glacial silt in suspension in the liquid, not the reflection of the sky. Here endeth the lesson, which is very appropriate considering we were right beside the Church of the Good Shepherd, a tiny picture postcard church made of wood and stone, enough to turn you religious, almost. In winter, though, it's cold enough here to freeze the balls off a bronze dog. Of course, so much beautiful scenery can only go so far before it completely overwhelms the elderly overseas visitor. And on to Geraldine, and the one and only problem with Sean's bike. No need for helicopter glue this time, and a relatively minor fault, caused by a nut on the bike. And you can take that whichever way you want.
And we can put the shorter bolt to this side. Now that's the plan. And we're on. Right, well I think we've solved the problem. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to say due to Kiwi ingenuity.
We did actually go through Christchurch, but got lost in the city's confusing suburbs, so no fun there, and no video footage either. Not that we wanted to stay there anyway, with a soak in the historic thermal pools of Hanmer Springs beckoning. Apart from the thermal pools, it's also well known for its alcohol and drug rehabilitation clinic. Not that we needed that, of course. No. The pools today are popular with young couples, with newlyweds, and of course, the elderly, infirm and gay. In the late 1800s, segregated nude bathing was the order of the day, and hoisting either a skirt or trousers up a flagpole indicated the gender of the bathers.
Today they haven't even got a flagpole. Mind you, the water's beautiful.
While we were at the springs, there was an earthquake. But unfortunately, the earth didn't move for us. We didn't feel it. But an elderly gent in the pool knew all about it.
Felt it in Christchurch. And I reckon it was spread from Christchurch right up through the coast. Yeah.
Well, the earth didn't move for me in here, I'm afraid.
No, well, probably wouldn't feel it here. Yeah. But I was in a two-storey house.
Yeah.
And we're up in the top storey of MT actually, and the quake started. Yeah.
And you say about 14 seconds?
So the news said it was about 14 seconds. Yeah, it was a rolling motion.
But it was nowhere near as strong as the one he felt in the 1920s.
The vehicles were rolling on the road.
And when was that? Long time ago?
Yes, I was in a brick building at school at the time, and the teacher told us, sit quiet and feel the earthquake. And the building was built in 1890, a brick.
Yeah.
They should have got us out, really.
So we soaked up a bit of history too. We left too late to reach Kaikoura and go whale watching as planned, but we did find some other large creatures of interest. There's something eerie about these monsters keeping silent vigil over the windswept coast. Despite looking derelict, they're actually used by local fishermen to tow their fishing boats out of the water. And they weren't the only interesting bits of engineering that day. This single-lane double-decker bridge, which opened in 1903, carries rail on top and vehicles underneath. We rode a little bit of history that day, not realising that some years later it would be replaced by a very ordinary two-lane span.
And this is Marlborough, where we started our journey. When I first got here in 1969, most of the fields around here were in crops or grazing, and many of them, in the corners and at the ends, were piled high with boulders.
That's because it's an alluvial valley, so there were plenty of old river stones which the farmers saw as a nuisance, until grape growing came along. Suddenly, the boulders were just what the grape growers wanted.
And the way they work is just like a night store heater. In the day, the sun shines on them, they absorb the sun's heat, and at night they slowly release it, which means that basically the grapes' roots have nice warm feet. Nature's night store.
That was it. 2 weeks, 2 bikes, 2 Brits, and only 15 years to get the video edited. A great ride, during which we met some great people. A trip of a lifetime, and a lifetime of memories. Memories that would linger forever and inspire further journeys and adventures.